Animation writer and producer Mychal Symka grew up in the shadow of Disneyland, which is still, to this day, one of Mychal's favorite places on the planet Earth. So, it's not surprising that he is now working in animation, even if it's not in exactly the same way that most interview subjects on the Animation Guild podcast work in the field. Mychal, you see, writes dialogue, voice directs, and reconstructs the storylines of animated features that have been created in other parts of the globe. Essentially, he rebuilds CG features from places like Spain and Argentina from the inside out. Theatrical animation is today so commercially viable that almost every American movie company wants to be doing it. Lionsgate Entertainment, the most commercially successful independent film and television distribution company in North America and the seventh most profitable movie studio, knows that it needs to be in the game. It isn't playing in Pixar's league, but it's partnered with Mr. Symka in his 5 most recent animated projects, releasing each of them on various distribution platforms. We spoke to Mychal Symka on April 8th at the Animation Guild. We're talking today to Mychal Symka, who is a writer, producer, editor of animated features that fly below the radar of Pixar and DreamWorks and Fox Animation and like that. And Mychal, we were talking earlier, what is it that attracted you to getting into animation in the first place? What's your background and what pulled you into the industry?
Well, I grew up in Anaheim, and my mom worked for Disneyland ever since I can remember. My dad wasn't around, and so I went to Disneyland all the time when it was closed. I could go on rides before they opened them to the general public. Every Tuesday, I think it was, they showed the films, the old classic feature animated films to employees and their kids. So this was before you could get them on VHS or later DVD.
Yeah.
So I was at Disneyland. Disneyland was, that was my life, and Walt Disney was like a father figure. My first attempt at working was I created my own comic strip and sent it to the Orange County Register when I was 8, and I won a contest drawing Mickey when I was 5, I think. So it was kind of that in conjunction with being a child actor. My grandma used to take me on interviews to do commercials and little brief stints on soap operas and whatnot. Wasn't hugely successful as an actor as a kid, but it stayed, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I love the business. I later I pursued a degree in music composition as well. So I find that the thing that's most like films is classical music, especially like a symphony or the sonata form, and just the structure of everything. There's a lot about what I work with right now. I'm kind of working in the box of a certain format, and I have to make everything fit to those rules that are already established. I can't do whatever I want, like some of the bigger companies out there who can just write a scene and it just happens.
And then put it through the process, and they create it from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So your animation, you're not creating it from scratch. You're basically working with foreign animation producers, and you're doing CG animation, right? You haven't done any.
Yeah, they're all CG.
You haven't done any hand-drawn films.
Not yet. Nope.
So you started with several about 5 years ago, and which one? Tell us about your latest. What's the picture that you're doing with Lionsgate that's coming out, and walk us through the process of how you get that done and ready for release and things like that.
Okay, well, the latest one is Birds of Paradise, and that came out on April 1st, and that's starring Drake Bell, Ken Jeong, Ashley Tisdale, John Lovitz, Jane Lynch, Keith David, and Dallas Lovato. That one was animated in Argentina.
Yeah.
So the quality of animation, obviously, as you may know, it was done on some less expensive.
Wasn't the $100 million
It wasn't the
budget.
$100 million budget, exactly. But the characters and the way that they're drawn, the way that they move, I related to it, and I thought it was cute, and it was something that if I can work my magic on it, I can make it something that people want to see, despite the fact that it's down to the last pixel might not be the technically highest.
Now,
most advanced animation.
how did you come across the film, or was it in work when you got involved with it?
Yeah, well, I used to work in foreign sales, so I went to Cannes. I've been going to Cannes every year since I can remember now.
Yeah.
And I worked in foreign sales, and then I started casting for foreign sales companies. So rather than keep going with my little foreign sales shop selling $500,000 films, I went and worked for the big guys and cast their films, because foreign companies tend to have difficulty finding Hollywood actors who want to work with them, because they're just so far away. So that's what I did, and I cast a film for Lars von Trier, who's won the Palme d'Or several times, and from there I started looking at the animation companies, and because they go to Cannes too, and then I made a complete study of every animation company out there in the entire world, and I got in contact with them, and I pretty much know almost every animation company out there that's done something of note right now, and there's hundreds of them. So
that have done animated features.
That have done animated features, yeah.
And so how do you go about casting? You find a film.
Mm-hmm.
You are in contact and communicate with the original producer.
Right.
And so how do you go about bringing it on board, casting it? What's your casting process? Things like that. How do you? Do you start by first repurposing and rewriting a script, and then send it out to agents, or do you?
Well, I used
contact
to do that.
agents before.
I used to make the script, completely write the script and write all the jokes in and everything, because I change literally every word of the film, and maybe one or two words stays from the original. But since the character's lips on screen, that's not the actual person who's saying those words, especially with a robot or something, their lips just kind of do that.
Right.
So I have a lot of leeway. I can change the dialogue completely. I write subtext and new stories and jokes all over the place.
Does your music background come in, because you
100%.
probably have to do
100%.
beats and break it into syllables and make something that fits?
That's a big part. But what I've really realized about a scene, it's equally about the sense of the scene and the pulling the heartstrings and the funniness of it. That is one side, and the other side of what makes something work is the rhythm.
Yeah.
So what I see is in these films, especially the films overseas, the rhythm, it'll be like silence for a long time, and then lots of dialogue smashed up against each other, and it's just so jarring that you can't get a handle on that scene. So the first thing, the most important thing, is we even that rhythm out for the entire film, because without that you can't allow yourself to emotionally invest into the film. So that's what I really pulled from my music background.
So how do you go about doing that? Because you've got certain rhythms that are built into the film, so you have to do a little editing.
Well,
and
rhythm is not just the time, something here, something there, and we do work on that level. So if there's a character you're looking at the back of his head, we can always put that's an old ADR trick. You can put a line
Sure.
which isn't actually there. So we do that, but a lot of rhythm is the dynamics and the volume. So if you have one character yelling blah blah blah, and you have another one, well, this is going to happen like that. That's really jarring. And unless you really want that, if you're trying to jar your audience and wake them up, that's fine. But if you're doing it without any purpose, then your audience is going to get confused and they're going to lose interest. So that's really what I mean by rhythm. But tone as well is a big part of it. On The Little Penguin, I had Jay Moore and Jerry Trainer from Nickelodeon. come in and do the duck announcers. So they were announcing for the race. And Jay is doing this thing, it sounds just like, Mexican TV, where he's like, goal, and he's like, and they're out and they're going to do that, And Jerry came in and he kind of was doing the same thing. So I was like, well, it has to be like melody and harmony.
Right. So you got to contrast.
And so, but what else are you going to do when you have, TV announcers? And Jerry's just such a huge personality that I was like, okay, well, we have to take it up a notch. So what I did was I showed him this atonal opera by Berg, or Berg, I guess is the pronunciation, Wozzeck, where everything is like kind of, and so I said, speak your lines like that, and play it against we'll play it against what Jay did. And he's like, you're crazy, this is insane. But what it ended up doing was just making these colorful points, and you can really pick out his lines from Jay's.
It's like
and it
counterpoint,
makes it so much fun.
sort of.
Exactly, it is counterpoint. Yeah, a lot of times, especially when you have 5 characters, like a real group scene, you really have to think of the counterpoint in that.
So how long does it take you, and how long does it take you to construct the script when you're essentially juggling multiple balls in the air? Keep the story, keep the sense of it, keep the rhythm.
Yeah.
How long will it take you? Because it's kind of like a puzzle. It's like a very complex puzzle in some ways. I mean, you can't just sit down and write.
No.
There's no blank page.
We did it in, like I said, this is our 6th film now with Lionsgate, and we did it in different ways. We've tested different methods of doing it. I've tried writing it character by character and just like make sure that you love the character. But then when they're playing off another character, like that got kind of strange. And then I was like, well, the most important thing is just make this funny. And then, so we just wrote jokes all the way through it. And that was one way. And then another way was, just getting a more detailed plot and whatnot. A lot of times these stories are very simple, most of the time. But after 6 of them, I think we have a process now which is not going to change. We start with basically just like ironing out the entire thing and making it, and just like deconstructing it to the most simple level. This is about a bird who does this happens, then that, and here. Now get rid of everything else, right? And we basically we try to get rid of almost everything. Because 90% of the time that stuff is what's confusing you and what doesn't work. So we make this dialogue, rather than being about 10 different things, we make the scene just be about that one thing. So it's just like you have clear direction. Then after that happens, then we start like saying, all right, now how can we polish this? So now we have the structure of the house, and how can we make this a little bit better?
Right.
And we do that several times, but it's not finished until I actually record the voices. So the final script, even if we've done 5 or 6 passes of, for emotional value and for the story, for the jokes, even if I've done 5 or 6 passes, by the time I get into the vocal booth with my actor, only about 50% of that actually remains. So I write probably 50% or more of the film while I'm in there directing.
Yeah, because the actor probably wants to adjust lines. I mean, aren't you? It would seem to me that you would have to be doing sort of a looping session, because wouldn't you have the film up there so that they're matching? So essentially, you're doing a repurposing looping session when you're in there with the actor.
Yeah.
And tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that the actor will throw in intonation and maybe word changes that they're more comfortable with. So
some actors more than others, but everybody adds their own thing, no matter who it is. Like there's not one actor who came in and just gave me the lines on the page or just what I'm telling them to do. They always bring a part of their personality or something that they'd want to do that they can't do other places. And that's why, a lot of the actors that I work with, even though these are small movies, they really like working on these.
Now, how long does it take? That's the other thing. Take me through the mechanics. How long does it take you in a recording session? Because years ago I was, in animation recording sessions. But you're not matching. You're not looping, you're not any of that. You're essentially, they're in there, adding to, but reading reading the script and adding what they add, and there's no, there's no looping.
Sure.
So you're not going back over it and over it. So what's the process for them? How long does it take to? It's not a 2-hour session. I would assume it takes a little bit longer than that. And you bring each actor in for what, a day?
Yeah.
2 days?
More sometimes. It's usually 1 day though. The leads in the film require more than 1 day, obviously. But the smaller roles, it's a day or less. I like doing it that way. Honestly, I'm starting some original features now. So having worked on these, repurposing, I've been approached by foreign film companies, especially for the ones that I've already worked with, that have new ideas, and they're saying, "Well, why don't we work together from the beginning?" Now?
Right,
and,
absolutely.
And so I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great, but we're going to have to do it a little bit different." And I still want to do the end process. After it's all done, I still want to bring all the actors in and rewrite the whole thing, because that's just my process, and I don't want to go reinventing the wheel. Which I guess I did, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel twice.
Right, and primetime animation is kind of like that. They use a sort of the sitcom. They do it and then they rewrite it as they go. Except sometimes it gets dicey because they've already animated it once from the beginning, and then the writer wants to redo it. And if he's the producer, he gets to redo it.
But then they reanimate after.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I want to do it. I want to do it without reanimating at the end. Maybe a tiny bit just for the lips, to make it absolutely
to keep your cost down, not to go back.
No, not to keep the cost down, because I feel like my creativity works when I'm stuck in this box
when you're in a mold that's already set.
If I can just put anything I want and just go willy-nilly, whatever I want, then I feel like the lack of constraint there will make me be less creative. I think especially with those classical, like at the Baroque era, Bach would write the two and three part inventions and whatnot, or sonata form with Mozart and Haydn, or Beethoven. They're very specific formats, and it's because of that format that they were able to be so creative with that.
So you're working to do the same thing with dialogue. And story and all of that. Mm-hmm. So you see yourself as going towards being in the process that you're doing now, but backtracking all the way to the beginning. Mm-hmm. And being on the story development process.
The story development process to some degree. I like to, I like to let the other people, put the stories that they're really excited about, because I kind of look at what I'm doing as like, you remember that old game Squiggles? You draw a little thing and I just have to create something on that. If I don't have that first line, then it's hard for me to draw something after that. So I've tried writing my own scripts from scratch and whatnot, and I never like what I do as much as when I'm working with someone else, and I can
You want
feed
something
off
on the
of
page
energy.
that you can now embroider and add to, rather than start with a blank page.
Even if it's almost nothing, just tell me that it has to be about ducks. All right, that's all you care about. It has to be about ducks. At least I'm bound by that one rule. Now my brain can focus on that.
You want a corral to operate inside.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want the whole plane going out to the end of the earth.
Right. I feel like my films would just be this crazy, huge variety show if I did that.
So that's what you're doing now, and this is your new release. Now, this film was released theatrically, video on demand, DVD, the one that just came out April 1st.
Not theatrically. So all those others, but not theatrically. We haven't had a theatrical release through Lionsgate yet.
So for any of the five?
For any of the five. Delhi Safari, which is the first one, so that was my foray into animation, which I only cast that one.
Right.
I didn't write or
then
direct.
Take us through the others. It was Delhi Safari.
Right, which I only cast.
And then there was?
And then Kung Fu Rabbit, which was the first one that I started off casting, and then getting to work with the producers, they said, well, why don't you do these other things? We need these other things. I said, well, okay, sure.
Okay.
And then after that, that's when I first started working with Lionsgate, because that film eventually went to Lionsgate. I worked for the Chinese producers first. But
Okay.
Eventually went to Lionsgate. And then I've been working with Lionsgate.
So for the last 3 or the last 4, you've worked with Lionsgate?
Last 5, yeah.
Last 5?
Mm-hmm. Grindstone, which is a subdivision of Lionsgate.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and that's been great because now I don't have to worry about going to Cannes and making my deals with foreign producers and whatnot, which can get a little tricky. It's when you're dealing with a business colleague on the other side of the world. So a lot of what I'm doing is directly right here in Santa Monica, so that makes it a lot easier.
And you're headquartered in Santa Monica?
Yeah, Grindstone and Lionsgate are in Santa Monica. We're in Woodland Hills.
Oh, okay, so you're over the hill.
Yeah.
And then, where do you see your role in animation going? We talked about this a little bit earlier. We talked about branching out, doing more original productions.
Yeah.
You from the beginning, and also getting into the distribution and building platforms. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, there's several directions that I want to go. I just noticed a flyer out in your lobby for an improv class for animators, and I thought that was really interesting because it has a lot to do with it's similar to what I want to talk about. And when you think about the big films, the $100 million or $150 million films, they have the most technically advanced, beautiful animation on the planet, and best money could buy. But as you know, a 15-second scene can take literally a month to animate because it has to go through script and storyboard and animatics and all the lighting and shading and everything else. And then the writer comes in and say, well, it seems kind of canned now. It's like choreographed too much. Well, sorry, that's pretty much what we have, and we're not going to spend $1 million to rewrite your line. So the way that they work, they kind of paint themselves into a corner a lot. And, and the films which sound more canned or look more canned than others. Some of them do it beautifully, and they don't seem canned at all. It's amazing. Like Frozen, for example, I just loved it. I thought the voice direction and just everything about the movie was spontaneous and free and beautiful. But there's others that aren't. And I think what I'm doing right now and taking a film which you have all the lips already animated, and then I can change all the dialogue, and so you can't tell that I'm even doing that. It looks like it's the original lines. I think that actually has a huge value for the big studios. It's something that none of their guys know how to do.
Right.
They know how to do other things, but they don't know what I've learned and I've taught myself to do over the past 2 years. So either I want to work in conjunction with one of the big studios on a mega feature, or I'm also, which I'm actively seeking investors right now on. I'm building an MCN, a multi-channel network, which is kind of the trend in media. I'm sure you've heard about the Maker Studios deal that sold to Disney for $500 million, and this was an MCN.
How long was that up and running before they sold it? 2 years?
Yeah, and and Awesomeness TV, which is a guy from Nickelodeon, Brian Robbins, that was up and running for I think 9 months before it got its $33 million deal plus 100 and some odd for benchmark bonuses. So this is all for live action stuff. That's not even an animation thing. That's at the core of that is low production value, but fun. Guys that really know what they're doing in their specific genre. I really know what I'm doing in my specific genre. My genre just happens to be connected with animation studios, which have huge production value in the content they're producing by comparison to what they're doing. So I'm assessing the cost of what it costs me per second, per minute of animation, including all the things that I do, including the rights and all that stuff. So we can get down to a per second, because I've only really refranchised, redialogued, reversioned, whatever you want to call it, about 12 hours total of animation. And my business plan, or white paper as they're calling it, for the MCN is a total of 1,000 hours.
How are you going to manage to ramp it up from 12 to 1,000? Well, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, isn't it?
Well, it'll go in steps. I'm not going to hire 30 guys to do what I'm doing right now. I think it's difficult what I do, but it's not something that I need to, go to the ends of the earth to find someone that can do what I do.
Yeah.
It's they just have to do it. They have to do it this way. I've already figured out how to do it. They need to be willing to learn how to write and direct in a different way that they've never done before.
Yeah.
And I can train several directors, several writers per month on this system, and I can have. It would take about a year to have everything going at full capacity, and that's
when would you launch? Halfway through the ramp up, or at the end of the ramp up, or because at some point you're going to start the distribution, and then you're going to have to feed that beast.
right. We won't start right. We won't release the content right at the beginning, obviously.
Right.
But we're also not going to wait until an entire 1,000 hours are produced. So it'll be somewhere in between. Because trends change and whatnot, we want to stay current, and especially with the cast that I have hired YouTube stars. I'm looking at working with some kids from Vine, and just every month a new social network or social media platform comes out, and you have to be part of that. You have
What
to
catches
know
and what doesn't.
Yeah, because that's what kids are watching. They're watching their content on their phones now. They're watching it on their iPads. They're on the train or in the car going to school.
You design it for those platforms, right?
Yeah, and we're gonna make our connections that we need to with the video games and with the other interactive type things that they can do on the internet to right from the beginning to work with our content.
Yeah, okay. But you're never going to see Lawrence of Arabia platformed on your phone.
Probably not that. Love the movie, but it's just not what I do.
No, well, it wouldn't mean much on an iPhone.
Well, maybe like a squirrel like traveling on the back of a turtle through the desert or something like that. We could call it like I don't know, Larry of Arabia.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So when do you plan to? What's your business plan then? You're going to continue this path that you're on, and then start your multi-channel universe when? In the next year, the next 2 years, or
In the next few months.
next few months?
Yeah. So I mean, really, it comes down to I'm either going to work on a huge mega film because I really, really want to do that. I really want to work with the best and brightest from Pixar or DreamWorks or one of these companies. And if that doesn't happen, then I'm going to do this. But that's sort of my ultimate goal, is just to make, because I don't want to make necessarily a huge quantity of product. I want to make a lot of products so each one can be a little bit better. So when I say I've made 6 movies, or 5 movies with Lionsgate, one before, I'm not proud that I've just made so many. I'm proud because each film was a little bit better than the one before. I don't think you can learn from school or from being told how to do something. You just have to keep doing it. And Walt Disney had a verb. Everybody else used it as a conjunction, but he used the word plus as a verb. To plus something means even if it's not great at the beginning, if you plus it, it'll be a little bit better.
Right.
And the next one will be a little bit better. And that's what I've been doing.
So you see yourself as a plusser.
I'm a plusser, yeah. Yeah.
And all that good stuff.
That's at the very heart of the foundation, the core of everything I do. I don't want to lock myself into one specific thing because I always want to be able to improve it.
So I want to circle back to one thing. Do you do it one actor at a time when you do your looping recording
Yes.
acting sessions? You never bring in 2? Or
Not usually. No.
Yeah, okay, that's what I would think.
It just logistically, it's too difficult. The schedules and whatnot. And I actually kind of like just having one actor, and I kind of have the whole dialogue in my head, and I have it on the page, and I have the script there, and I know where this could go. So I get a lot of variations, especially with the first person in a 2-man scene. The first person I say, okay, let's try it with this like kind of joke version, and then let's try it where you're angry at him for not showing up work on time, and let's try it on this, and we'll go down that. And then when I bring in the second actor, I usually have a pretty good idea of which way I want to take that scene.
Right.
And then they do all their little minor variations, so it's creative in a different way, and they're playing off of each other. but it's kind of like
Does actor 2
remotely.
listen to playback of actor 1 who's already recorded, or do you-
Sometimes. Sometimes I don't want them to.
Right.
Because they'll tend to copy what the other person is doing.
Right.
And so like what I did with, like what I was mentioning with Jerry Trainer, he was doing what Jay did, and I wanted something completely different.
Right.
You know, and I'll actually, sometimes I'll say it like a question, even if it's not a question. I'm going to school. Why would I say that as a question? I'm telling my mom I'm going to school, right? No, just say it as a question. And then when I play it back for them, they say, oh, it doesn't sound like a question when it's with the other line.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
that's the flow of the scene. You know, so sometimes it's good to let them hear the other actors, and sometimes it's not good.
Yeah, just depends on the situation.
You know,
Well, I think we have covered what you're doing rather well, and I think you're really going in a direction with theatricals that I haven't seen before. I've seen repurposed television, but I haven't seen a lot of repurposed, redone, restructured theatricals, even though they're going on platforms other than in large screen theaters.
yeah.
I thank you for coming, and I thank you for giving us your thoughts on this.
Thank you so much.